Watch right now on the Front News project. Kiev under enemy fire. The enemy strikes the city center. The first ever battle of Ukrainian armed forces naval drones with Russian aviation. Unique footage. Moscow. Elimination of a war criminal. Exclusive details. Fiery, hot and blazing footage from the front line. Watch right now. The bloody war continues. A war that Vladimir Putin and his entourage unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people in the fight for their freedom continues. In the next 30 minutes, you will find out the truth about the war, which our journalists are extracting from the hottest combat zones. Ready? Then let's begin. And we begin right away with another terrifying missile attack. This time, the capital of Ukraine, Kiev, is under fire. According to the military administration, 8 Russian missiles of the Kinjal and Iskander types were launched at the city. In total, 5 ballistic missiles were shot down out of 40 drones and another 20 UAVs.
Did not achieve the goal.
Blumki ammunition fell in 3 districts of the city. 630 residential buildings, 16 medical facilities, 17 schools, and 13 kindergartens were left without heating. A building was damaged.
St. Nicholas Church, 1 person. More than 10 were injured.
Amidst all these enemy atrocities,
The armed forces of Ukraine have truly carried
historical event, the first in
out
the world.
Battle of Sea
Drones
Shivers.
of the SBU with aviation of the Russian Federation and Ukraine are winning the battle for the sea. More specifically, the group of marine drones SBU Saibabi engaged in combat with Russian helicopters, airplanes and patrol boats Raptor. Russian equipment was hit. There are dead and wounded on board, and the helicopters themselves were significantly damaged and now require major repairs. More details to follow.
These are not scenes from an action-packed thriller, but another lightning-fast special operation by the Security Service of Ukraine with a visit to temporarily occupied Crimea. Starring marine drones, Sea Baby. On the night of December 7th, armed with large-caliber machine guns, they entered the Kerch Bay and engaged the occupiers in an unexpected air-sea battle. Butua di Ijate.
These machine guns are not installed to destroy a helicopter, but to drive it away. There is limited ammunition, and imagine the psychology of a Russian pilot. He approaches the drone, cuts to atakomeš, to urakomeš, and then it returns
In
fire.
response, I see our sea drones first chased away the Russian Su aircraft and the patrol boat Raptor, and then precisely fired at the sea barge and helicopters that were trying to block our sea drones. But it turned out the opposite. The Security Service of Ukraine intercepted enemy radio communications in which the occupiers speak of killed and wounded, at least in the targeted helicopters. For this, our drones will leave the site of the special operation.
Have you seen this video? This operation became public. In the same way, it is the control of the ports of Crimea. Crimea itself is temporarily occupied, but the ports are effectively controlled by Russia. They can no longer afford it. I mean the combat fleet.
Next,
Breathe,
Naval Commander
Dave.
Alexei Nagishpapa showed an equally swift special operation in Crimea by his subordinates. In these frames, combat drones strike gas platforms seized by the occupiers near the coast of the temporarily occupied peninsula. Such pinpoint strikes in Crimea have an effect no less powerful than strikes on the Kerch Bridge itself, experts say.
When we attack the Kerch Strait, it is not only about the so-called Crimean Bridge, Kerch Bridge, the Kerch crossing from Taman through Tuzlu-Kerch. There are 2 bridges, railway and highway. In addition, there is the Kerch ferry crossing, the port of Crimea and the port of Kavkaz, and the connection between the Kerch seaport and the port of Temryuk.
But let's return to the illegal Kerch Bridge, or more precisely, to the likelihood of missile strikes against it. It has already twice received explosive gifts from our military and special services. The first time was in October 2022, when spans of the road collapsed during the explosion and part of the railway bridge caught fire. The second time hit the bridge was on July 17th, 2023. At that time, one of the destroyed spans of the covering also halted the occupants' logistics. Since there is a saying that things come in threes, it is logical to assume that the third explosive event on the Kerch bridge should have already been arranged by the Atakemes and Storm Shadow, which have been waiting for approval from Western partners for a long time. But for some reason, they remain silent, and there are several explanations for this.
First, we have a limited number of these rockets, but for each target we've already hit, we use an average of 5 to 8 pieces. Remember the famous Antonov Bridge? Well, come on, what about that bridge? It's not the Crimean Bridge, but a small one. Remember how many times they hit it with HIMARS? You can't destroy such a structure with a single 100-kilogram explosive. This requires a very complex, prolonged, constant operation. It's very difficult to strike such a structure from the air.
Moreover, after 2 attacks on the road bridge, the Russians pulled almost all available air defenses in Crimea towards it. In particular, the S-400 systems and the entire list of existing radar systems for them. They are also patrolling with aviation, simultaneously sinking barges and constructing additional water barriers to protect the bridge from the sea.
Not necessarily Atakemes type missiles. It could be other air forces that have repeatedly operated in Crimea. It could be the Navy. You periodically see and hear reports about something exploding in Crimea almost every day or night. Some things are simply not shown.
Targeted strikes with precision missiles like Atakemes or Storm Shadow can at least destroy key supports of the bridge. No one doubts this. However, some experts believe that it would be most effective and appropriate to use German Taurus missiles, which Chancellor Scholz has long hesitated to hand over to the troops. Their ability to penetrate even the deepest reinforced concrete bunkers is clearly visible on video. However, due to the high density of enemy air defenses, many missiles are required to destroy the Crimean bridge, and we receive them only in limited batches. Therefore, while the missiles remain silent, our military and special services are preparing new surprises for the occupiers in Crimea, and they seem to be becoming regular, because as the head of the SBU mentioned, as long as Crimea is occupied, it is doomed.
But these are not yet all the bad news for the enemy. Thousands of munitions were destroyed. Security service drones gave Russians a hellish night in the Donetsk region. It detonated at the warehouse all night. At the same time, North Korean troops are suffering heavy losses in the Kursk region. As a result, assault groups are being reinforced with fresh personal weapons. The very same new personnel will be thrown by the Russians into meat grinder assaults again. Moreover, Russia has problems with the ammunition it received from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Right now, in our segment, more details about all these topics.
Security service drones caused a hellish explosion at artillery and mortar depots near the village of Markino in the temporarily occupied territory of Donetsk region. The warehouses stored thousands of munitions for infantry fighting vehicles, tanks, anti-tank guided missiles, mines, grenades, and millions of rounds of various calibers.
Judging by the detonation and the aftermath of the explosions, it concerns the destruction of one of the largest stockpiles of Russian occupying army's combat kits. Apparently, the security service was tracking the logistic supply routes of the occupying forces, and at the moment of maximum accumulation, an attack was carried out on this warehouse.
Meanwhile, the North Korean troops sent to Russia by DPRK dictator Kim Jong-un to participate in the war against Ukraine have already suffered losses. Ukrainian military published photos and videos. We are talking about at least 30 North Korean soldiers killed and wounded.
Are used practically as disposable soldiers, fully understanding both the problems of the language barrier and the lack of horizontal connections and the layered nature of the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine. plus accordingly the capabilities of the Ukrainian defenders in conducting a preemptive strike using both weapons and accordingly FPV drones.
According to the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, North Korean troops have irreversible and sanitary losses as well as missing personnel. In other words, North Korean troops have become cannon fodder that the Russian army uses in infantry attacks in the Kursk region. Due to the losses, assault groups are replenished with new North Korean military personnel.
The Russian Federation, including the Kursk region, there are up to 12,000 military personnel from North Korea. Therefore, accordingly, the loss of 30,000 people, this is not significant considering the total number of North Korean military personnel. Accordingly, there will be reinforcements of personnel and the further use of North Korean military personnel directly in combat operations in the Kursk region.
And while the KPA troops are joining the ranks of the Russian army, there are fewer Kadyrovites. North Korean soldiers opened friendly fire on the Akhmat battalion.
According to the NSU, about 8 members were eliminated. This is evidence of a lack of horizontal connections, a lack of interaction at the unit level. This all leads to the incurred losses in personnel and questions regarding the further use of North Korean military personnel, either directly in combat operations or in the territory of Kershina or in the occupied areas of Ukraine.
Russians have problems not only with military commanders who cannot fight and have a language barrier, but also with the ammunition supplied by Kim's regime to Putin. The quality of North Korean weapons leaves much to be desired. Their shells have low accuracy and often cause artillery malfunctions.
One should mention that those artillery shells that were transferred to North Korea are from long-term storage. There is such a concept in the storage category of artillery shells. The first category is accordingly 100% efficiency. And then there are the second and third categories. Judging by the quantity mentioned by both Western intelligence communities and accordingly the Ukrainian intelligence community, it is several million shells. The military-industrial complex of North Korea is not capable of producing such a quantity of artillery shells. So it means that these shells were supplied from long-term storage warehouses.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian side continues to strengthen its positions and repel enemy attacks. According to analysts, the use of unprepared units only accelerates the process of exhausting the enemy and brings closer the turning point in the war.
And right now, an analysis of the operational situation on the much-suffering Pokrovsk and Kurakhovo fronts, where the enemy continues its bloody frenzy. The enemy's high activity remains in the Pokrovsk direction. 10 times today, clashes of varying intensity began. Near the settlements of Sukaya Balka, Mirolyubivka, Luk, Lisivka, Dachinska, Solona, and Novovasilivka, Ukrainian units repelled 9 attacks. One more battle is ongoing. The enemy carried out an airstrike with a cruise missile on Vodianoye. On the Kurakhovo direction near Solnsevka, Starye Terny, Andreevka, Kurakhovo, and Dakhnoye, 3 assaults were repelled. 5 skirmishes are still ongoing. And right now, exclusive footage on how events are unfolding at the line of contact in the Kurakhovo area and on 2 flanks from the city. To the north beyond the Kurakhovsky Reservoir and to the south at positions on both banks of the Sukhi Yali River. All of this in a report by TSN war correspondent Yulia Kirienko.
Kurakhovo from a bird's eye view, a city located about 15 kilometers from Donetsk, occupied since 2014. Currently, Kurakhovo is half occupied by the Russians. Destroyed high-rises and completely empty streets. In just 2 months, Kurakhovo turned into a battlefield. The front around it was closing in from the north and east almost simultaneously. In October, the occupiers succeeded in the Hornyak area. The town is at a dominant height, which opened the road for the Russians all the way to the shores of Kurakhovo Reservoir, which divides the town. Even the water spill remaining after the explosion at the dam in Starye Terny did not stop the enemy. Simultaneously, the Russians are pressing on the city from the south after the fall of the nearby Ugledar. The city has been repeatedly called the Gate of Kurakhovo. The defense positions began to crumble like a house of cards. The armed forces were losing nearly a village every week.
And the Russians continuously assaulted and used those...
They used equipment and advanced with infantry in waves. They surrounded them based on the positioning of our units. The most recent breakthrough by the Russians where they achieved success was the Uspenovsky pocket. There our units were practically encircled within a day. 10 Russian armored vehicles breached our defensive line and deployed infantry, which went on to assault the positions of Ukrainian soldiers. The occupiers cut off the only road from the village of Hanevka that our troops still held. Ukrainian fighters, which included 3 units of the armed forces, were forced to leave the Uspenovsky pocket, relying on their own luck in any way they could.
Потом пришла команда «Выходи». Кто камышами, кто по болоту, кто по полю, кто
The front around Kurakhovo has tightened even more. And now there is only one road connecting our forces, which holds part of the city no more than 7 kilometers. And that part of the highway is completely under enemy fire control. Not only from Russian artillery, but also from attack drones, which swarm continuously over the Donetsk-Kurakhovo-Zaporizhzhia highway.
But now about the situation on the Lyman front, the enemy is also becoming brutal here. There were 7 clashes near Tverdoklebovo, Zeleny Gai, and Terny on the Lyman front, and Serebryansky Forestry. One combat encounter is still ongoing. The enemy actively used aviation in this direction. Tverdoklebovo, Nadezhda, Sergeyevka, Grekovka, and also the Serebryanskoye Forestry were subjected to an airstrike. And right now, about the elimination of a war criminal in the capital of terrorist Putin's Russia. And so, following the Lebanese pages that exploded in the hands of terrorists in the Middle East, now an ordinary, seemingly scooter has entered the history of bold special operations around the world. How did they monitor General Kirillov, the head of the Russian Armed Forces radiation, chemical, and biological defense troops? And how was the explosive device activated? Journalist Ioana Sesachuk from KTSN will provide more details.
A moment of the explosion is spreading on social media, which made Russia tremble.
Dude. Thought it was a drone.
A person dies in it who amused the whole world with stories about Ukrainian battle mosquitoes. And Daily committed war crimes by ordering the use of chemical weapons against Ukrainians.
Here is an unknown object. It didn't work, did it? It didn't work. Sometimes it's dropped with some kind of poison on a person, then epilepsy starts, they begin to suffocate.
Russian General Igor Kirillov was recently charged in absentia. Chemical munitions were used against Ukrainian troops more than 4,800 times.
I thought they unloaded cement quickly.
At 6 in the morning, they weren't unloading cement under General Kirillov's house. Instead, at the moment when he and the driver were leaving the house, a scooter exploded there.
According to the investigation, an explosive device was planted in a scooter standing near the entrance of an apartment building on Ryazansky Avenue.
Both men died on the spot near their car. The fact that generals explode in the middle of Moscow, their neighbors were not prepared for.
Those scooters are parked right by that entrance. We just don't know.
A few days ago, a car-sharing vehicle stopped near the house. A camera wrapped in cloth was left in it to avoid attracting attention. The camera broadcast images over the internet. It was thanks to this that the device taped to the scooter was activated at the exact moment General Kirillov exited the entrance. The power of the homemade explosive device, the Russian propagandists claim, citing the investigation, was equivalent to 1 kilogram of TNT. Kirillov's home address was not difficult to find. It is merged into their network of databases, just like the addresses of other liquidated security officials. Tatas. In the occupied Sevastopol, Captain First Rank Trankovsky and GRU Officer Klinkov, the former submarine commander Zitsky, who was shot last year. Another Russian general and Stat Duma deputy Andrei Gurulev, who from the fall of 2014 to the spring of 2015 was directly involved in the formation and organization of combat operations of Russian occupation forces in eastern Ukraine. This is convincing Kirillov indeed died because of mosquitoes and Americans. However, his true activities are also remembered.
A person who clearly understood and monitored the activities of the United States and their satellites, with their biolabs and the spread of chemical and biological weapons. He exposed this everywhere and spoke about it. A person who ordered that weapon, which we are only supposed to see on the battlefield, of course. This is a very unhealthy precedent.
No official responsibility for the elimination of the general has been claimed by anyone yet. However, Reuters and a number of Ukrainian media sources, citing anonymous sources, report that it is a special operation by the Security Service of Ukraine.
Well, now we will discuss in detail the situation on the Severnian front. Let's be honest, this is another sacred goal for Putin and his disputes. Accordingly, the situation here is also extremely tense. Subtitles by Dima Torzok. Welcome to our channel. They shot down an enemy drone when it seemed unreachable. In Prikarpatia, mobile fire groups, despite lacking people and weapons, repelled another Russian attack on an energy facility. The downed drone fell in a field, far from residential buildings and critical infrastructure. It caused no damage. At what cost to our defenders shoot down enemy drones? Why doesn't even one of the soldiers' mothers know that her son is downing Shaheds? That's all about it. The next story is by TSN correspondent Ala Paz.
The night was just like any other night. Nothing special.
Just another massive attack of enemy drones, the guys say, with energy facilities in the rear targeted. Andrei's mobile fire group was alerted in the middle of the night. The guys moved to their position, set up, and didn't have to wait long for the drone.
He already paced us our position. He was retreating. My comrades quickly reloaded the launcher, shooting at the metal until the ammunition ran out. After that, he disappeared from the site.
Desperate reaction. The drone didn't explode, so so the soldiers thought they missed. But through the shield, it just broke apart in the air and fell in the middle of the field. Because it had a meal which was aimed and away from residential houses.
Few people still managed to recharge this weapon. We are short on a few people and our calculations are incomplete. According to the book, we managed with incomplete calculations. There are only 3 of them in the mobile group. 3 in 1 or 2 in 1. Me and the drivers are loaders. Maybe someone is a gunner too.
Ruslan joined the army directly from Maidan. He says it was a conscious choice. A former orphanage child. Yes, he had the right not to serve. But without hesitation, he went to defend Donbass with the Azov regiment. Now, together with the pilots of the 114th Brigade, they hunt for drones. They are in the sky, he is on the ground, he doesn't hide his face. He says as a member of Azov, he's been a target for the enemy for a long time. He has no relatives, so there's no one to fear for.
Azimuth 100, distance 20.
Because the commander in Balaklava says he doesn't want to be recognized on the street. Especially astonishes, even his mother doesn't suspect that her son is hunting for Shaheds.
Mainly my wife and a couple of close people. My mom, who thinks I am somewhere at a civilian job because she has already been there since the year 2013.
The mobile fire teams are critically lacking people and weapons. Although on the eve, not only the energy stability of Ukraine, but also the lives of civilians. The sky in the rear is protected by the guys with an anti-aircraft gun from the 1960s. They compensate for the lack of weapons with their own skills. Between battles that do not rest, they train.
It's practically impossible to hit with missiles from it. That would just be luck. But against Shahed drones it works great, especially the reloading guys had to hone their skills to an automatic level because we mostly work at night. It's very dark, you can't see anything, so you have to work extremely fast.
Despite everything, this mobile fire group has not only shot down Shaheds but also several missiles. Men who do not agree to bow their heads before the enemy are called upon, side by side, to defend the sky over their homes.
Well, now for the Vremivka direction of the front. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill and maim here as well. On the Vremivka direction, the aggressor attacked 10 times in the areas of Uspenivka, Konstantinopil, Blahodatne, Neskukne and Novodarivka. Currently, 3 attacks have been repelled and 7 are ongoing. Enemy aircraft struck with gliding bombs on Novodarivka, Timirivka and Zeleny Pol. Well, on the southern borders of our country, Ukrainian defenders monitor the enemy 24/7, repel attacks, and prevent sabotage groups from breaking through the line of combat engagement. First and foremost, drones help with this, of course. How exactly this happens will be told and shown by our colleagues from the Breeze Broadcasting Company.
The hum of drones is always heard in the sky here. Our defenders are constantly conducting reconnaissance and preventing the enemy from approaching positions. Enemy UAVs try to identify gatherings of people or equipment and hit the target. Defenders say that sometimes it seems like a whole flock has come, so many iron birds are overhead.
If we're talking about reconnaissance, we know to our FIMI out in the First Defense Command, we out at some tall place because we monitor the front line to ensure no enemy forces reach us. On the territory where we work, we have generally seen many different targets. These include electronic warfare systems. If there is something useful or some ammunition, we try to find out if they need to be destroyed. Secondly, there are communication systems, various antennas, and this is also important so that the enemy cannot monitor the actions of our fighters. Electronic warfare stations that we recently found.
Stanislav Odesit joins the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine in February 2024. However, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, he actively helped the army. He was one of the organizers of the volunteer headquarters Avtomaidan. Tudan, at the moment, one of the battalions holding the south has gathered many friends from Odessa. In civilian life, they all had different professions, and then they united for volunteer aid. Now they are coming together at the front.
Our guys are fighting in the east, in the Kursk direction. Any enemy force that comes into the sight of our scouts is amazed by our FPV.
Thanks to drones, Ukrainian military hit a variety of targets, preventing the enemy from reaching our positions, identifying locations, or discovering ammunition sites. Moreover, for example, at night drones stand guard without stopping. It's the only way to succeed.
Detect and stop the saboteurs.
You understand that the day was not wasted. You did something good and there is one less occupier. There are many of them, so there is work to be done here.
Most often, the enemy shoots at gatherings of peaceful civilians. And it makes no difference whether they are in line at a store or if an ambulance has arrived on a call.
As always, the terrorist state wages war against the peaceful population of our country. Recently, this news spread across all networks. They struck an elderly person on a moped with an FPV drone. Then the police and ambulance that arrived at the scene were also attacked by the enemy's FPV drones. They make no distinction from what we see. They don't think, this is military, so we'll strike here. No, they just hit wherever they reach. Whoever they see, that's who they shoot at.
Effective combat management is both a collective and individual effort. Celebrating successes and learning from one's own mistakes is essential together.
If something went wrong, we all gather as a department, sit down and think about why it went wrong and what we can fix. You constantly need to stay trendy, informed, read both our and enemy public posts to know what they're using to fight, what we're using to fight, who's developing what, and think, come up with something of our own.
Unfortunately, the enemy advances daily and achieves successes. This is primarily due to their superiority in manpower and equipment. However, our warriors, our titans, hold their positions and continuously repel the Russians' attacks.
The hope that all this will end, that we will kill them all and finish
living the best civilian life.
That's all for today, but very soon on Front News, there will be new unique materials from our journalists from the most intense war zones, obtained so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.